According to the Department of Transportation regulations of New York State, a pre-trip needs to be performed on a school bus before each shift. So I'm here today at Niskayuna Transportation Department with driver trainers John Joyce and Dan Elliott, and they're going to help us perform a school bus pre-trip.
I'm Dan, and I'm going to start off with the way we start off every time, and that's the basic overall look of the bus, the quick look. As we're walking up to our bus, we check it out for just general appearance, if it's square, if there's any body damage, if it's tilted, where a spring was broken or something like that. We look for cracked glass. We look at all sides of the bus that we can see from the front here, both sides. And just make sure it's a good candidate to take out. Why spend time looking at this if there's a major defect, if there's a puddle underneath or a tire is flat or something like that. So we just do a quick look at the bus, make sure it's okay. This bus is a good candidate for taking out today. So we're going to take a closer look now. We're going to start in the front by opening the hood. We have to unlatch both sides. And then we'll open the hood. Try not to just use your back. Get your weight into it so it opens smoothly. Don't let it go. Let it open smooth. Then we come around to the driver's side. We'll start on this side. We like to do it in an orderly fashion. Before I start though, I make sure I have a few things. I always use a flashlight when I'm doing a pre-trip. You can see things better. I have a Kleenex or a rag because we're going to be checking some fluid levels and we want to keep our hands clean. So we're going to begin, once the hood is open, by looking underneath the hood here. We're looking for splashes, any material that came out of a fluid container, like we have power steering, we have radiator fluid, we have transmission oil, engine oil. If any of those were uncapped, loose, and they sprayed fluid out, it would show up on the hood. We'd have to get that taken care of before we go any farther. But this hood is nice and clean. All the parts look in order. There's nothing hanging that's broken or anything like that. So this part's good. So we're going to work our way back. Up front here we have the radiator, and that's intact. The hoses look good. We have what's called the radiator shroud, which surrounds the fan. We have the fan itself, multi-bladed. The blades are in good shape. There's nothing stuck in there. We look in the back side of the radiator. If we see, and I'm going to shine a flashlight on that, if we see anything that's leaked out of there and dried off, if you get depends on the kind of fluid you have, but a pink looking stuff that's dried on there or a green looking thing that's dried on there, that's a leak. You'd want to get that checked. But our radiator looks good from the back side. We come across the top of the engine. We have caps that we look at. The cap is secure. On the top of the engine here we have transmission oil. The transmission oil is a twist off cap on this one, quarter turn I believe. So we twist a quarter turn, we pull it out. Now, here at Niskayuna, we do check to see if there's fluid. You cannot tell if it's absolutely perfectly full to specs because to do that, the bus has to be running. But we do have transmission fluid, so we're happy with that. We don't let the dipstick get contaminated by hitting the ground. We keep that nice and clean. We put that back in. I'm using my Kleenex, keep my hand clean. Now, transmission fluid, if it's burned, if the transmission was abused, you'd have a very funny, smelly odor to it, but this one is fine. We come across the top of the engine sill, we have our windshield wiper mechanisms, and everything is intact. There's nothing hanging loose, so that looks like it's going to work fine. Over here, we have the back of our brake pedal. So we have all the air lines that come into the back of the brake pedal and then go out to the individual brake units. There's no hissing sound or anything like that. Nothing's cut, damaged, melted. All the electrical connections look good there. We come down a little bit further. We have the oil dipstick for the engine oil. This dipstick's quite a bit shorter than the last one. I'm going to pull it out. There we go. As we pull it out, I grab it. To check your oil, you usually have to do 2 stick pulls. You pull it, you wipe it. You can check for your markings on the dipstick. Flip it over here. There we go. Now on this dipstick, there's a checkered marked area where our fluid is full. If it's below that, we have to add. So we're going to stick it in there, get an accurate reading, and see what kind of oil we got. The oil's always pretty black. That's not a bad thing. Open this up. pull it out slowly, hanging on to it, and we can see that our level is above the full mark. You can see the word full right there. So we're good. So this bus is good oil-wise. Now we're going to come across, we're going to look at hoses again as we come across. Everything's intact. We don't see any leaks, nothing falling apart. Come across to the power steering reservoir. Power steering fluid is kept in here. There's markings on the tank that say minimum cold, maximum hot. We're right in the middle, so we're really happy with that. Anytime you see a cap, like the power steering fluid cap, we just make sure that's tight, snug. This cap is tight and snug. We come across here, and the fluid line is good. There's no broken spots, no cracks or anything like that. It hasn't dried out. It's a good piece of hose. Coming down here, we're looking at the frame, and the frame cannot be bent. It cannot be cut, welded, or drilled in. This is nice and intact all the way front to back. Also, we have the shock mount right here, and that's in good shape. And the shock absorber vertically is fine. There's no leaks. That piece of equipment is filled with oil, so if it leaked out oil, it would show up on the bottom usually, and a leak would be pretty obvious. You'd have to get it serviced. We come back up in this direction, and we're going to look at the steering column. This is the steering column right here. You can see the spline shaft right here, and if I wiggle it, you'll see the steering wheel move up there. So you know that's the steering column. It's connected to the steering gearbox. This gearbox is filled with hydraulic fluid from the power steering unit, and it's under pressure. So if anything leaked out, if we saw leaks at these seams, that would be bad. We'd have to have it looked at by a mechanic. But the gearbox looks good. It connects the gearbox connects to the pitman arm, which is a great big solid piece of metal here. That's in good shape. At the bottom of here, we have what's called a castle nut, and it's named that way because it has little cuts in the top that look like the top of a castle of the old days. There's a cotter pin in there that has to be there to keep the castle nut from backing out. This whole unit will move back and forth to make the wheels turn. The linkage that connects it to the tires is right here. That looks like it's in good shape too. We follow the shock down again. We're going down and we see the leaf spring. This leaf spring is pretty long. It's probably about 4.5, 5 feet long. It goes all the way back there. This is the suspension for the bus. Leaf springs can break, they can crack in half, fracture, but this one looks like it's in good shape. That big flat metal there, you see it goes all the way back. When we look at the whole thing, in the front there's a leaf spring mount. That's right there. That connects the leaf spring to the frame of the bus. In the back there's another mount, and that connects the leaf spring in the back. Those are good. The last parts that we're looking at on the leaf spring are called U-bolts. These U-bolts, named because they're upside down U's, they attach the leaf spring to the axle of the bus. There's 2 of them. They're in good shape. They're intact. Nothing's broken. If something were to break on this and you're driving the bus, you would usually hear a pretty good rattling noise, or you'd want to check that out immediately. You wouldn't want to keep driving the bus. So we're down here. Now we're going to come across to the inside of the tire. We're going to look. We have the brake unit. The brake unit's right here. Has an air line going in. The air line looks good. This has some electrical wire that comes in. That's covered. No problems there. The unit itself, this is a disc brake unit. Some buses have drum brakes, some have disc brakes. If they have drum brakes, they will have what's called a slack adjuster right out here. You'd have to look for the attachment point and the cotter pin and that, so that everything is ship shape with a slack adjuster. This does not have a slack adjuster. It's a disc brake. So that looks good. The inside of the tire, we're looking for what we shorthand call ABC, which is abrasions, bumps, and cuts. So we're looking for the integrity of the inside of the tire, and then we also look at the inside of the steel wheel. Make sure there's no bumps, cuts, or anything like that that would make it questionable for driving. The top of the tire we come across, we're looking for even wear. There's nothing that's uneven about this one. You have to have 4 32/2 of an inch of tread to make this tire legal. You cannot retread a front tire. This tire has nice even wear, so we're happy with that. We come to the outside of the tire, and that ABC comes into play again. Abrasions, cuts, and bumps. Front tires tend to hit things like curbs and stuff, and if they really get damaged, you don't want to take them out on the road. So we're looking for anything that looks suspicious on here. This looks really good. The wheel itself, a steel wheel, we looked at the inside, now we're going to look at the outside. The integrity is good. There's no bangs, no scrapes off the paint or anything like that, no rust. We can pretty well be sure that this wheel is in good shape. Down here we have lug nuts. This particular bus has the flags on it, which give you an idea if the lugs started to back off, because the flags are all pointing in one direction on this bus. If they were out of order or pointed up, that lug nut had come loose. But if you don't have the flags, go around, feel the nuts, make sure they're tight. You can look for a gap, which would be a telltale sign that it's backed off, or if you see like a clean, shiny area that has no corrosion, that means that just got exposed. That would be suspect. Inside, this is the hub. Now, this bus has fluid in this hub. If the seal is no good and it leaks, that's bad. We'd have to get it serviced. But this is nice and tight. There's no extra fluid on the outside. The hub has nuts on it that stay tight and they look good and they're all accounted for, so that's good. There's a cap on that hub. It's where they fill the oil, and that's tight. Coming around here, we have to look for a valve stem. Our valve stem should have a cap on it, and this one does. It's got an extension, everything's nice and tight. You can look in the holes of the wheel and you can see the rotor, which is the shiny part in there, and that's what the brake pads push against to slow the bus down. And that's a good looking rotor, okay? If you had disc brakes, you would see the drum there. A drum is a big cast piece of metal. If it got overheated, it might turn blue, or if it really got abused, it might crack. But we don't have one to show you, but that's a good disc brake pad, or disc brake in there. Now, we're going to come back here. Under here, we have a mud flap. It has to be attached and in place. That's good. We're happy with that. Now we're going to walk around to the other side of the bus and continue to look under the hood for things that could be wrong. Hopefully we only see things that are right. Now, we're going to start again towards the front, and we're looking for splashes that we might not have picked up on the look-see from the other side. And it looks good. Everything looks fine. So we come across the top. We've got the radiator looks good on this side. There's a hose that looks good. Our fan shroud is good. The fan looks good from this side. This big piece of hose looks good, and piping. Then we come down here. This is a serpentine belt. It drives three things on most buses. It might be slightly different on your bus, but on most buses it's the alternator, the water pump, and the air compressor. The belt at its longest point can only have 3/4 of an inch of play. That means that it's tight enough when you can only move it 3/4 of an inch or less. If you have a lot of play, it's too loose. So our belt looks good. There's no cuts or scrapes. It's not split, cracked, dried out. So that's a good belt. Then we're going to come back. Our alternator looks good. The top of the engine looks good. We come up here. This is our radiator overflow tank, radiator fluid. The cap is tight. It is marked for the quantity that this is adequate fluid. If it's below that, it's too low, and everything above it is good. Right here we have our air cleaner, which is a big element that cleans all the air, keeps the pollen and the dust out of the engine. It's a fairly big unit, a lot bigger than what you'll see on your average car. It has an indicator on it. If it gets restricted because it's full of dirt, there's a red line that shows up right here, and that would mean the unit has to get serviced. So if we see red in that clear area there, we'd have to tell the mechanics. All the connections look good there. We come across here, we've got our washer fluid tank. In this unit you have to have at least a half a tank to leave the property. This has got plenty of fluid in it. We check the cap is tight, the lines are good, there's no leakage, and the electricity is hooked up to it. We go across, we look at our frame, same thing that we were looking for on the other side, any bumps, any welds, any cuts or anything like that, no damage. This is a good frame, you can follow it all the way to the back. Towards the back, we have a shock absorber, well hidden back there, but I'll put the light on it, and you can see that it's back there, there's no leaks, everything looks good, the bolts are tight on the bottom and the top, and it's connected correctly. Now we're going to look, just like on the other side, the springs. Big leaf spring right here. The leaf spring, again, same size, it's like 5 feet long, goes all the way to the back. There's no breaks in it, nothing broken. The front has a leaf spring mount, that's secure. The back has a leaf spring mount, and that's secure. In the center, you can see these U-belts better on this side. You can see there's two of them there, and they're both intact, no cracks or anything like that, nice and snug, and that's the way we want it. The axle's there, that connects us over here to the back where the brake unit is. We've got brake hose, we've got electrical connections, and everything looks good. There's no slack adjuster again on this one because it's a disc brake. Back of the tire looks good. We're checking all the way around. The back of the rim looks good. We're checking all the way around. So we're happy with that. We come across the top, looking for even wear. Have to have 4/32 of an inch of tread on this to make it legal, and we're good. We come across to the outside, looking for scrapes, abrasions, bumps, cuts, and this looks good. We look around the whole thing. The tire is basically round. It's really tough to tell if they're a little low on air because they don't really sag that much, but this one's nice and round, so that's good. Our rim is good. There's no dents. It hasn't hit a curb or anything like that, compromising it. While we're up here, we see the valve stem, and it's on capped. Our lug nuts with our flags gives us a good indication that everything's tight. Our hub is not leaking. We have nuts, bolts on here to keep that tight and secure, and that looks good, and the little cap is tight. Again, you can't retread the front ones. These are brand new tires only on the front. Under here we have a mud flap, and that's intact and it's hanging nicely. Everything looks good. So from there, we're going to close the hood and secure the hood latches. Now, I believe I'm going to turn it over to John now to do the outside of the bus. Okay?